With the world's eyes on next Friday's high-stakes summit in Alaska between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, European leaders are rallying to defend Ukraine's sovereignty. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has called for emergency virtual talks, bringing together Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, and key European leaders ahead of the showdown. Meanwhile, tensions with China appear to be easing, as Washington and Beijing have agreed to extend their trade truce by another 90 days, just hours before steep tariffs were set to snap back into place. I'm Henny Saif. Let's get in focus. US President Donald Trump will join European leaders, including the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, for an emergency virtual summit on Wednesday, according to Politico. Organized by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the summit comes ahead of Trump's meeting with the Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday to discuss ending the war. As reported by Politico, the virtual summit will focus on pressure options against Russia, questions about Ukrainian territory seized by Russia, security guarantees for Kiev, and the sequencing of potential peace talks. Merz and other European leaders demand that Putin first agrees to a ceasefire before any peace talks or land swaps between Moscow and Kiev can take place. They have also made clear that any potential territorial exchanges must be balanced and agreed with Kiev, and that Ukraine should receive firm security guarantees to protect it against further aggression. In a call Sunday, Merz urged Trump to impose tougher sanctions on Russia's banking sector and its global trade partners. And to help us focus more on this story, we are joined from Rzeszów by Ms. Kamila Zaricka-Romanowska, a professor of EU Law and Security Studies. Ms. Romanowska, welcome to In Focus. While European leaders will hold an emergency video call with Trump and Zelensky ahead of the crucial Friday talks between Trump and Putin, do you think that Europeans are banking on Trump applying real pressure on Putin, or are they just preparing for a US position that diverges from theirs?
Well, to put it really short, Europe hopes Trump will use US leverage to obtain a veritable pause or a meaningful concession. But Brussels and key capitals are simultaneously running contingency plans for the realistic possibility that Washington outcome may divert from the EU line. So this is a prudent hedging, I would say. Why is this really sensible and why it's important? Because Trump's public language is about land swim and quick fill-out meeting, which increases the probability of headline bilateral outcomes that either are short-circuit multilateral verification or will be made to pressure Kiev to accept painful compromises. European unity is visible, clearly, but it's not perfect. 26 out of 27 leaders signed a statement insisting Ukraine must design its future, an explicit, preemptive attempt to shape the political envelope before Alaska. Hungary's non-association demonstrates fracture that Moscow and Washington both could exploit. The battlefield facts remain quite important as well, because we can see now a renewed Russian offensive in the eastern Ukraine, which is making a purely diplomatic freeze politically riskier, and a ceasefire could go freeze when it comes to the games. And Europeans clearly plan to hedge by accelerating material pledges and proclaim clearing sanctional measures. But practical implications are big difficult, because in public diplomacy, when we have these 26 states of the EU, there are parallel disputes offer to Washington, like turnkey verification and sanction packages. But at the same time, acceleration of European operational measures. For instance, defense shipments, stockpile prepositioning, to show that Kiev retains leverage, any sort of leverage, in the situation where the talks falter. The rapid consistency, shows that the immediate activation of a sanction and defense structure of US-Russia deal face allied red lines, and it's really difficult in the difficult way stitched, I would say, when it comes to comparing and connecting dots and doing knots.
Well, what leverage do the European leaders have to persuade President Trump to adopt a tougher stance on Russia?
Substantial, but indirect. It's political, economic, and operational levers rather than coercive command, I would have to say. Because those key levers, which we can highlight as an economic and sanction amplification, for instance, EU can make US sanctions far tougher by coupling them with market and regulatory measures like banking restrictions, trade controls, 19 US sanction package plan, etc. That will increase the pain of Russia would suffer and making a falter US posture being effective. Another one is concrete capability offers, and that's NATO and EU delivery, because Europe itself can reduce US political risk of a confrontational line by promising and demonstrating, of course, follow-through procedures like pre-pledged air defense systems, logistics, intelligence sharing, and rapid reaction forces. And in this case, NATO visible posture and Mark's Rutte public framing that Alaska is a test of a brutal seriousness can help to create such a credibility. At the same time, we have intelligence and threat narrative. And it's really important as well, because sharing an allied intelligence that links Russia actions to wider hybrid threats like cyber threats, disinformation, asymmetrical one, and at the same time exposing Iranian drone transfers and PR support from Beijing, that can help reframe the conversation for US domestic audience, which is a broader strategic context and not merely a regional dispute. And this is something which clearly will show the citizens of the United States that their safety, their personal security, and their own business are at stake as well. We have to see here as well that the Europeans will clearly as well try to fight the target incentives. Because if necessary, Europe can offer some sort of transactional carrots, cooperation on energy, or trade openings, or even joint initiatives in other theaters, for instance, to help White House to self-firmness domestically. But limits are, and they are clear, because none of those tools are to be switched. They are persuasive and apply US powers, but domestic US politics and President's personal preferences remain decisive. And unfortunately, those are not in the favor of Mr. Zelensky.
Ms. Romanovska, European leaders insist on Ukraine's full participation in any talks. Now, how important is this principle for the continent's long-term security architecture, and what happens if Ukraine's involvement and participation is being marginalized?
Well, to put it short, it's indispensable from the European and NATO perspective as well, because Ukraine's participation is legally and operationally fundamental. Excluding Kiev, or just excluding only in order to exclude Zelensky, would create a precedent that utterly undermines the post-Cold War rules-based order. I can understand that Mr. Trump personally doesn't like much President Zelensky. Maybe that's an idea to invite somebody else, because this will be really difficult from legal and operational and geopolitical details. For instance, from legal constraints, Ukraine consultation requires legislative approval and effectively a popular referendum to change borders. The president cannot unilaterally set the territory. Any external imposed territorial settlements would therefore be unconstitutional, and politically explosive in Kiev. And tension in the domestic issues are quite observed in there as well. Another one is operational necessity, because verification, reconstruction, and any security guarantees require the host states' cooperation. Peacekeeping, especially in the context of stability policy, which NATO beautifully developed, both the doctrine and practice, showcase that the access to bases or a building program cannot be implemented without Kiev consent and participation. Moreover, the precedents and deterrence, accepting deals that alter borders without an affected state encourages revisionist powers, Russia and first as well, China as well, to test borders. Europe's defense posture and NATO position depends on upholding these principles that borders do not change by force, and that's important. Moreover, there are some practical policy measures to safeguard the principle as such. Because Europe's role is to ensure that Ukraine's role itself is not negotiable process precondition on the public record. Any bilateral US-Russia contact can only set procedural or exploratory aims, not decisions.
So, well, if Trump were to align more closely with Moscow's vision, which is still a very big possibility, how would that impact the US-European relations in the short term?
Well, the short answer to this question is that will acute strain with rapid operational consequences, possible, maybe not even longer-term strategic realignment if the divergence persists. Because if that will happen within the 3-6 months, we will see the immediate practical effects like trust erosion, which will invoke rapid public rebukes for this policy coordination and political shock across capitals. And the formal diplomatic fallout and increase of friction with the NATO Council as one. Another one is operational decoupling, because Europe accelerates defense industrial and procurement plans, greater EU defense autonomy and sovereignty in the context of defense. That forms coalition of the willing to sustain Ukraine and tightens bilateral security pact with Eastern members. The NATO summit decision, defense spending targets, which I talked about recently, already points towards greater European burdens. The sanction fragmentation are important as well, because the US and EU could diverge on sanction rollbacks or relief, producing legal and financial headaches for banks, corporations, and for whole global economy, which will obviously create very big uncertainty in global markets and quite a big shakeup. The longer terms, when it comes to the risk and adaptation, well, Europe may deepen strategic autonomy and sovereignty as well due to more defense spending, new procurement chains, but it will be costly and tough, and it will take time to substitute US military weight. On the other hand, a sustained US-Russia alignment could push NATO to reconfigure force posture in the Baltics and in Central Europe. And that's dangerous, that's expensive, and the competition in the near term will be really difficult. So it's difficult to assess, but unfortunately, it doesn't look promising.
Yes.
Neither for US, neither for EU.
Well, then, what role can shared NATO or transatlantic security interests play in aligning Trump with European pressure strategies? Or how can Trump persuade Putin to an immediate ceasefire as well without any territorial concessions?
Well, I think that first of all, we have to see the concrete roles and practical instruments which might be really decisive. If NATO converts politically well into administrative way, the visible package for White House, with a connection to the European Union, this could really help out if that will be, for instance, Turkey package, which includes sanctions, verification, and capability. Because if NATO and EU will present a single cost package, for instance, immediate material timeline, a NATO technical verification mission, and a sanction ladder that the US can adopt and present as a win. This makes allied pressure actionable and political saleable as well. Moreover, we can see a verification and enforcement role that may offer credible NATO technical monitoring, like OSIM, on-the-ground team, satellite, verifiable triggers, etc. So any ceasefire is enforceable and not merely a headline. And Rutte and NATO leaders will have frame Alaska as a test of Putin's seriousness, of course, but NATO presence reduces the temptation of bilateral shortcuts. Moreover, counter asymmetric threats together as NATO, US, and EU will be very important, because US, NATO, US hybrid and cyber centers do attribute attack quickly and expose disinformation campaigns and coordinate defensive assistance to critical infrastructure. And those joint military intelligence, in broader context, products, they will show linkage between Russia, Iran, and Chinese actions that will strengthen the argument that this is a shared systematic threat. Coalition of willing will be as well important because if there will be unanimity with a decision, Hungary, even if dissent, will have to at least stay neutral. And that will be really visible coalition that can act quickly and demonstrate operational resolve and then just barge into space for Moscow. And I think the next thing might be actually something very important to Trump as well. Just let's not forget that Mr. Obama has won a Nobel Prize. This might be actually this very important step for Mr. Trump to be considered in this competition as well.
Well, we'll see about that from Rzeszów. That was Ms. Kamila Zarikta-Romanowska, the Professor of European Union Law and Security Studies. Thank you very much for joining us. As Trump readies for key talks with Europe, Ukraine and Russia, he's also easing tensions with China, signing an order to extend the US-China trade truce until November 10th, with Beijing announcing a similar move.
Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully take office of President of the United States.
Capitol open, the emergency and reciprocity.
Mexico. Canada.
Greenland.
In a positive move for US-China relations, Trump signed an executive order extending the trade truce for another 90 days that prevents high tariffs on Chinese goods from resuming, stabilizing trade between the two countries. According to Bloomberg, this extension, effective until November 10th, delays a planned tariff hike and follows earlier agreements to ease tariffs and export restrictions. The move also reduced fears of a renewed trade war and may pave the way for Trump's visit to China late October. However, some national security experts worry Trump is too lenient towards China. Meanwhile, companies like NVIDIA and AMD have deals to sell AI chips to China under strict revenue-sharing terms, though China has reportedly discouraged the use of certain NVIDIA products. Trump also hinted he might allow NVIDIA to sell a limited version of its top AI chip to China. And to shed more light, we are joined from Washington by Ms. Ginger Chapman, the lawyer and political analyst. Welcome, Ms. Chapman, to In Focus. What does the 90-day extension of the tariff pause signal about the current state of U.S.-China trade negotiations?
Yes. Well, Mr. Haney, it's good to be with you today. Greetings
Pleasure.
to your viewers. Thanks. And, well, this 90-day delay in the tariff wars has brought a much-needed reprieve to the American voter, to the American shopper. And the American people are very worried because we are expecting in September a price hike as a result of the earlier tariff wars, the earlier trade uncertainty from the beginning of President Trump's second term. And this deal right now is very important because many businesses and corporations and American shoppers rely on our upcoming Christmas holiday season. This is when businesses make a lot of money. And this trade deal right now, or this pause in the tariff wars with China, is designed to alleviate price pressure on Americans and on businesses during our big business period, which is the Christmas holiday shopping season. Right now, we are struggling under some domestic economic pressures. For example, our housing market is in a tailspin. Houses have become unaffordable for people over the last few years. We're looking at inflation due to the trade wars. At the same time, we're worried about job wage stagflation. So Trump's economic agenda is very threatened at home domestically by Trump's using tariffs as a weapon, using tariffs instead of diplomatic negotiations. And indeed, with China, there are more issues than just the flow of goods coming into America. For example, the national security issues that were mentioned. China wants our semiconductor chips. We would also like some of China's semiconductor chips that are supposed to be smaller and faster than ours. And in addition, China has excess manufacturing capacity that our local manufacturers are worried about. And then, of course, this morning, Trump said that he wants China to buy 4 times as many soybeans. They need the soybeans to feed their people. We need their export goods, medicine, household goods. So this 90-day pause on talks in Sweden gives us a chance to work through some sort of more beneficial, more reasoned, calmer trade negotiations than what we are seeing now.
Yes.
Especially.
Well, then to what extent do you feel has the preliminary agreement reached last month in Sweden helped pave the way for Trump's decision to uphold the deal and further extend the pause? Ms. Chapman, do you think the pause could be also extended beyond November 10th?
Well, one thing we have seen with President Trump is he's very willing to kick the can down the road. So the meetings in Sweden are a good sign because they are progressing. We have ongoing meetings. So Trump does like to delay. He does like to kick the can down the road. However, China is such a major trading partner. We get such an incredible volume of goods from China that this is an issue that he does need to resolve. It's a very complex ongoing negotiations because of it's complicated by America's pivot to the Pacific, to the South China Seas as part of our military expansionism, our hegemony. So we have a lot of conflicting pressures and demands on President Trump right now. We see some of our senators, such as Lindsey Graham, they want to pass bills that levy enormous tariffs on China and on Russia. And they want to do this because this gives them a weapon that they can actually use against President Trump and his ongoing negotiations in the future. However, Trump does need to contain the forces in our own government that are belligerent, that want military conflict with China, that seem to believe that we can browbeat China through economic trade. However, the facts are we need China to buy our treasury bills. We see countries such as Japan, China, they are now selling treasury bills. This will drive down the value of the dollar, which might be good at home to bring down prices. However, we are incredibly in debt. We have $37 trillion in debt. If other countries sell our treasury bonds, this makes it harder for us to pay back our debts. So this is all very entwined, not just our economic issues, and Trump needs to tread very carefully, specifically his belligerent statements combined with his team that needs to engage in diplomatic negotiations and hopefully even a meeting with President Xi later this year.
I'll have to cut you off, Ms. Ginger Chapman, the lawyer and political analyst. Thank you very much for joining us here on In Focus. But we now have to go live to Cairo, where Egypt's National Elections Authority is set to announce the final results of the 2025 Senate elections. Let's watch.
And the path of development supported and endorsed in a very promising, being in the front line of electoral scene and represented the higher representation of the voted or the voters, which is a unique phenomenon that reflects the awareness and the political culture for a generation that is longing for a better future for the Egypt. All the stages of the electoral process manifested the scenes of great people. All participants were up to the responsibility. The candidates and voters, parties, members of judicial systems, observers and followers of the media platforms, representative of NGOs, civil societies domestically and internationally. All were committed by the Constitution and the law, as well as the rules laid down by the National Authority of Elections, pursued only one goal, which is the achieving democracy. For the elections to come up and an expression of the voters. Great solutions for each voter casted their ballots, approached the polling stations to fulfill their duties despite the hot weather, and for Egyptians abroad were burdened with traveling and reaching the polling stations in a real and genuine expression of the nation belonging. Wish also to thank and appreciate ladies and gentlemen, or Mrs. and Misters, the members of the Judicial Authority exerted all their efforts and were up to the event and responsibility. Special thanks my colleague Dalia Mahmoud Hassan Yusuf Radi, First Secretary Representative of the Prosecution Administration for the constituency of Tanta, and Ms. Mayadas Al Said, Croatian Assistant Consultant of the State Lawsuit Authority, the head of the sub-polling station of El Mahalla. The first were hit upon the fall of a fan in the polling station. The latter was injured by a wound in her eyes, yet following the remediation, they insisted to complete their national duty upon handing over the casting pouch. Special thanks to my colleague Mahmoud Abdelmenem Amara, Deputy the Chief of the Loose States Authority, Chief of the Subcommittee of Hamada, that received a very sad news of his father's death, never left the polling stations for hours until his replacement came. Many condolences for my colleague, and may Allah rest his father's soul. Thank you for the great thanks and givenness, and I call the two colleagues to stand up. Please be seated. And a great solution and greetings for the men and women in uniform from the police, and I thank the officers of Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Expat Affairs and the Egyptian pause abroad for their excellent effort to facilitate the process of voting abroad. Special thanks to the journalism and the media workers for transmitting a real and genuine proceeding of the electoral process. Great people of Egypt, after receiving the statistics of the Council for the public stations and the addition of the expats voters, the board of the National Authority for Elections was convened 2 days afternoon, the 13th of August, and issued a decree number 34 of 2025 by adopting the final result for the Senate Council of the second term of period of 2025 as follows. The results are as follows. Number of registered to the database of voters 69,333,318 voters. Number of casting the ballot in inside and abroad 11,837,328 voters, of a percentage of 17.1%. A number of the sound votes 11,321,070 votes of 95.33% of the total attendees. The null vote 500,318 of 4.33% of the total attendees. First, the list system. The candidates throughout the 4 constituency for the election and list system, the one list of the National Unity of Egypt included 11 political parties as follows. مستقبل وطن Party, حماة وطن, and الجبهة الوطني Party, and the الشعب الجمهوري Party, and the Development Party, Justice Party, and the Progressive Advanced National Party, whereas the Generation Will Party, the Conference Party, and the selection of the election system results as follows. First, the constituency of Cairo and the southeast of Delta, the number of voters registered in such 25,850,913 voters. A number of those who casted their ballot 4,745,457 voters, of a percentage that of 98.3% of the total attendees. The null votes are 50,660, of a percentage of 1.7% of total attended voters. The number of the voters of the list system 4,669,609, of a percentage of 18.6% of the total registered voters. The number that never casted or voted the list 34% of a percentage of 13% of the total registered voters. Secondly, North and central of the Upper Egypt sector, the number of registered voters as such 25,826,899 voters. The number of those casted ballot 4,317,000 of a percentage of 98.7 of the total voters. The null votes 44,723 of a percentage of 1.3% of the total voters attended. The number that voted the list 4,258,527, sort of a percentage is 16.49% of the total registered voters. The number that did not vote for the list 58,474 of a percentage, 23% of the total registered voters. Third, east of Delta sector circle, the number of the voters registered as such 8,481,284 voters. The number of those casted the ballot 1,315,883 voters, of a percentage of 15.52%. The number of the sound voters 1,099,613, of a percentage of 98.76 of the total attended voters. The number of the null votes 16,270, of 1.24% of the total voters attended. The number that voted the list 1,285,181, of a percentage 15.15% of the total registered voters. The number of the votes that did not cast for in favor of the list 14,432, of a percentage 0.17% of the total registered voters. Fourth, a circle of Eastern Delta, the number of registered voters as such 9,174,222. The number of those voted casted the ballot 1,114,000, of a percentage of 15.41%. The number of the sound vote 1,401,250, of a percentage of 99.9%. The number of the null votes 12,919, of a percentage of 91%. The number of those who elected the list 1,076,946, of a percentage of 14.92%. The number of voters that never voted in favor of the list 124,304, of a percentage 1.35%. Based on what being said, the national list for Egypt had gained a percentage of 5% of the voters registered in each of the four circles designated for the list seat, as the winner of the allocated seats of the system list of such circles. Secondly, the individual system, the selection of the ballots resulted as follows. Cairo Governorates, the number of the voters registered of the Cairo Governorate, 8,544,319. The number of those voted, 2,231,802, with a percentage of 26.12%. The number of the sound votes, 2,133,010, with a percentage of 95.57%. The number of the null votes, 98,792, with a percentage of 4.43%. Names of winners, candidates who gain 50% plus one of total of sound votes as follows: Ahmed Hussein Faiz, Sabur Gamal Abu Futuh, Muhammad Ibrahim, Muhammad Magduddin Farouk Al-Manzalawi, Muhammad Mazloum, Muhammad Yusuf Mutawa, Emir Hilal Ayad Atiyah, محمد حمدي، مصطفى رزق، تامر عبد الحميد، ممدوح أحمد، إسماعيل علي، نصر الدين عباس علي، محمد مصطفى، محمد نور الدين، محمد أحمد عبد الرحمن فرج. الجيزة Governorate, number of registered voters, 6,166,932 votes. The number of those voted, 1,748,448, of a percentage 27.17%. The number of the sound votes, 1,724,136, of a percentage of 96.62% of the total registered attendees. The number of the null votes, 60,312, of a percentage 86%. The numbers of the winners: عادل عبد الفتاح مأمون ناصر، عمرو محمد يسري إبراهيم عبدو، عمر أحمد عمر محمد زايد، محمد جمال محمد علي، عادل زيدان حسن السوداني، محسن محمود أبو بكر، محمود علي عبد الله مرجان، أحمد شعبان عبد الرازق محمد. Alexandria Governorate, the number of registered voters, 4,488,555 voters. The number of casted votes, 720,951 voters, of a percentage of 16.21%. The number of sound votes, 705,956, of a percentage of 97.92% of the total attendees. The number of null votes, 14,995, of a percentage of 2.8%. The number of winners: Abdullah Saadawi, Raghib Dufalla, Omar Khamis, Omar Muhammad, Mustafa Abdullah Ibrahim Zahra, رجائي محمد عزت أحمد عبد الرازق طارق عبد الوكيل أحمد عبد الوهاب إيهاب زكريا عطلة عبد المسيح أحمد سعيد محمد يوسف. الشرقية Governorate, the number of registered voters 4,867,295. The number of those voted 764,400 of a percentage of 15.70%. The number of the correct votes is 737,443 of a percentage of 96.47% of the total attendees. The number of the null votes 76,957 of a percentage of 3.53%. Numbers of the winners: خالد محمد سعيد حسن شحاتة محمد مصطفى محمد لطفي مصطفى عبد الله محمد سليم سيد عطية أبو الخير يحيى عاطف الشافعي عصر عمرو محمد عبد الحميد التونسي عبد الله محمد الغزالي ماجد دياب سليمان غانم. الدقهلية Governorate, the number of registered voters 4,674,626. The number of those who voted is 762,068 of a percentage of 16.41%. The number of the sound votes 737,788 of a percentage of 96.18%. The number of the null votes 29,280 of votes of a percentage of 90%. The number of winners: جمال عبد الظاهر محمد إسماعيل خضر طارق محمد أحمد محمد عبد الهادي محمد عبد المعطي علي السيد أحمد محمد حسن الهواري خالد محمد البسيوني إياد محمود محمد صالح. البحيرة Governorate, the number of registered voters 4,355,190. The number of casted ballots 618,752 of a percentage of 14.21%. The number of the sound votes 603,056 of a percentage of 97.46%. The number of null votes 15,696 votes of a percentage of 2.54% of the total attendees. The number of winner candidates Sayyid Ahmed القفاص محمد وجيه عبد الله محمد خالد أحمد حسين عاد مرسي الفيشاوي عمرو سعد الذكي السعدي سامح علي مصطفى صالح محمود يوسف عبد الواحد علي لطيف. سوهاج Governorate, the number of registered votes 3,351,183 voters. The number of casted ballots 474,533 of a percentage of 14.16%. The number of sound votes 457,892 of a percentage of 96.49 of total attendees. The number of null votes, 16,641 votes, of a percentage of 53%. The name of the candidates: مجدي أحمد محمد خراطة، مدحت محمد عبد الجابر، محمد المدني، أحمد فوزي محمود أحمد، ميشيل مرعي، عطلة متري، محمد عبد العال، محمد أحمد. القليوبية Governorate. The number of registered voters: 3,642,613. The number of votes: 459,092, of a percentage of 12.60%. The number of sound votes: 420,049, of a percentage of 91.50%. The number of null votes: 39,043, of a percentage 8.50%. The names of winners: سيد عبد الحميد سالم حسن حجازي، هشام حسيني محمود حسان ربيع، عماد علي إبراهيم علي بركات، محمد عبد الحميد سعد أبو زيد، محمد أبو زيد، فتحي دسوقي سيد علي. أسيوط Governorate. The number of registered voters: 3,050,192. The number of casted ballots: 345,137, of a percentage of 11.32%. The number of sound votes: 331,609, of a percentage of 96.08%. The number of null votes: 13,528 votes, of a percentage of 3.92% of the total attendees. The number of the winners candidates: مجدي عبد الرحمن، سليم عبد الرحمن، مصطفى محمود، إبراهيم عبد المجيد، عبد العاطي أحمد، محمد علي، عادل عبد العظيم، عبد الحافظ خليل، عمرو إبراهيم، أبو العيون عبد الناصر سليم. المنيا Governorate. The number of registered voters: 3,800,679. The number casted their ballot: 450,120 voters, of a percentage of 12.11%. The number of sound votes: 452,723, of a percentage of 98.39% of total attendance. The number of null votes: 7,397 votes, of a percentage of 1.61% of the total turnout. The number of the candidates who won: Ahmed Mohammed Abdel Menem Ismail, Ali Ahmed Farghali, Muhammad Munir Yusuf, الطاهر سيد فتح الباب موسى، جمال عباس محمد جمال الدين محمود، أحمد فاروق محمد الجهمي. الفيوم Governorate. Number of registered voters: 2,213,828 voters. The number of casted ballots: 314,476 voters, of a percentage of 14.21%. The number of sound votes: 284,492, of a percentage of 90.06% 0.47 of the total attendance. The number of null votes, 29,984 votes, of a percentage at 9.53%. The number of candidates won: عمرو محمد عبد الظاهر أبو السعود، حاتم علوي، السيد إدريس عبد العال المليجي، عصام محمد حسين عبد الغني، وليد أحمد أبو بكر. المنوفية Governorate. The number of registered voters, 2,949,768 voters. The number of casted ballots, 393,670 voters, of a percentage of 13.35%. The number of sound votes, 373,372, of a percentage of 94.84%. The number of null votes, 20,298 votes, of a percentage of 5.16%. Of the names of the winners as follows: Osama Hassanin Madkour, Islam Omar Muhammad Al-Fishawi, Abdullah Mahmoud Al-Rifai, Abdul Haq Muhammad Ibrahim Muhammad Musa. Kafr al-Sheikh Governorate. The number of registered voters, 2,407,175. The number of casted ballots, 354,066, of a percentage of 14.71. The number of sound votes, 347,000, of 97, of a percentage of 98.03%. And the number of null votes, 6,969, of a percentage of 1.97%. The number of the names of the winners candidate: وليد محمد فتح الله محمد زيتون، سامي أحمد إبراهيم أحمد سعد، إبراهيم سيد عيسى. قنا Governorates. The number of registered voters, 200,369 voters. The number of casted ballots, 291,618, of a percentage of 13.25%. The number of sound votes, 271,718, of a percentage of 93.18%. Of total, the number of null votes, 19,900 votes, of a percentage of 13.82% of total. The number of candidates won: Abdel Fattah Ahmed Hassan Dunqul, Abdel Fattah Muhammad Ahmed Shahat, Ashraf Abdel Wahab Muhammad Mahmoud. Demaite Governorate. The number of registered votes, 1,151,674 votes. Number of casted ballots, 155,574, of a percentage of 13.51%. The number of sound votes, 136,239, of percentage of 87.57% of total. The number of null votes is 19,335, of percentage of 12.43% of total. The two candidate winners: Walid Salah Mustafa Al-Tamami, Amir Abdel Hadi Muhammad Al-Siddiq. Aswan Governorate, the number of registered voters 1,116,756 voters. The number of casted ballots was 165,509 of percentage of 14.82%. The number of sound votes 153,141 votes of a percentage of 92.53%. 368 of a percentage of 7.47%. The two candidate winners, Ahmed Saad al-Din Ahmed Mohammed, Yassin Abd Sabur Muhammad Ali. Port Said Governorate, the number of registered voters 544,015. The number of casted ballots 82,167 of percentage 15.10%. The number of sound votes 74,932 of percentage of 91.19%. The number of null votes 7,236 votes of percentage of 8.81%. The only winner, Ahmed Mohammed Gohar Zaid Gadallah. Suez Governorate, the number of registered voters 501,010. The number of casted ballots 74,169 voters of percentage of 14.80%. The number of sound votes 63,526 of percentage of 85.65% of the total. The number of null votes is 10,643 of percentage of 14.35%. The only candidate winner, Ahmed Mohammed Hafiz Abdul Rahim. The Red Sea Governorate, the number of registered votes 336,608 voters. The number of casted ballots 74,751 voters of percentage of 22.21%. The number of sound votes 71,710 of percentage of 95.93%. The number of null votes 3,041 votes of percentage of 4.07%. The only candidate winner, Gamal Saleh Hifni Ahmed. Mersa Matruh Governorate, the number of registered voters 370 and 477 voters. The number of casted ballots 74,466 of percentage of 20.1%. The number of sound votes 68,822 of percentage 92.42%. Of total turnout. The number of null votes 5,644 of percentage 7.58% of total turnout. The candidate winner, Muhammad Dakhil Abdul Rahim Ibrahim. North Sinai Governorate, the number of registered voters 314,724 voters. The number of casted ballots is 50,628 of percentage 16.09%. The number of sound votes is 47,656 of percentage 94.13%. The number of null votes 2,972 of percentage 15.82% of total turnout, and the candidate winner Sami Eid Abdel Aziz Hassan. South Sinai Governorate, the number of registered voters, 103,354 voters. The number of casted ballots, 19,029 voters, of percentage 18.41%. The number of sound votes, 18,062 voters. Of a percentage of 94.92%, the number of null votes, 967 of percentage of 5.8% of the total turnout, and the winner candidate Musa Farag Musa Hamid. Al-Gharbiyya Governorate, the number of registered voters, 3,631,916 voters. The number of casted ballots, 548,760, of percentage of 15.11%. The number of nulls, or rather sound voters, 522,482, of percentage of 95.21 of total turnout. The number of null votes is 26,278, or 4.79% of the total turnout. The number of candidates who won: Muhammad Al Said, Muhammad Aribi, Ahmed Wagdi Al Mursi Al Baz, Samir Subhi, Mustafa Abdel Daim, Muhammad Ibrahim Shuaib. And the turnoff in Al Gharbiyya Governorate between the following: Magdi Said Abdullah Al Birri and Ahmed Mustafa Muhammad Al Ga'bari. Bani Suef Governorate, the number of registered voters, 2,080,000.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a live press conference of Egypt's National Election Authority announcing the final results of the 2025 Senate elections. And that wraps up our episode of In Focus for today and the broadcast. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.